Hi, Sandra. Thanks very much for joining me today.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure of ours. You've got a very interesting kind of story, career, and I think we can kind of go straight in and you can kind of tell us a little bit about your career overall in Vegas and in law.
Well, sure. I'm a Vegas native. I've been here ever since I was about two. My father retired at Nellis Air Force Base here and grew up here. And I wasn't sure that I wanted to be an attorney until I actually went to the University of Nevada, Reno for undergrad, took a constitutional law class and knew that that was going to be my path. But I didn't definitely start kind of in the gaming industry. My mother worked in casinos kind of on and off when I was younger. And I think at that time, a lot of children had one parent in the military, maybe one parent in the gaming industry, but I didn't really plan on going into law or regulation in the gaming industry. It just kind of ended up there. So I went to law school at UNLV and worked at a firm initially for about 3 to 4 years, and then had a great in-house opportunity at MGM, which as a young lawyer, I think was an opportunity, of a lifetime, because even though I was handling litigation matters for the company, when you're working on those cases, you do get a glimpse of the operations and why certain policies and procedures are in place. And so it kind of gave me a different window into the industry other than the one that I heard from my mom kind of growing up. But at that time, I realized I definitely wanted more a transactional experience, and went on to the city of North Las Vegas. I worked there for about 8 years and ended up being the first African-American city attorney or person of color in the state of Nevada to serve in that role. And it was a deeply kind of gratifying position to be in public service. Also at a very difficult time, because when I joined, the city was one of the top 5 fastest growing cities in the nation. And by the time I left, we were on the verge of severe financial distress because of the unfortunate economic turndown at that time. And after that, I went to AT&T and, obviously a big telecommunications company, and was appointed to the Gaming Commission at that time. And that is a part-time commission because they meet once a month, but are the final decision makers on all regulations and licensing approvals. And I know it's kind of interesting that I was at the commission, appointed by then Governor Sandoval, and then was appointed to chair the board by Governor Sisolak, because Nevada in the US, it's a little bit rare because we have two kind of policy making regulatory boards. But the Gaming Control Board in Nevada is the day-to-day regulator 24/7 with a very strong and talented team of about 400 people across the state. And that's my immediate past position there. Definitely learned a lot from the great people that are there, and definitely had a better insight into the industry and regulation, and had a chance to meet wonderful regulators all across the US and the world too while I was there.
Sure. I mean, it sounds like a very, very wonderful sort of extensive career. When it comes to getting into gaming, you mentioned kind of it wasn't your immediate kind of plan. You didn't sort of wake up one day as a child and think, I'll go into the gaming industry. But do you think it was for kind of top lawyers in Nevada? Do you think it's almost destiny that you've got Las Vegas and gaming is kind of is going to attract kind of lawyers?
You know what I think? I think that at the time I thought there's more than gaming in Nevada. And so as a young lawyer, I wanted to try something outside of the industry that growing up here, we knew it's the dominant, industry. And it's interesting, when the law school opened here, the first graduating class was 2001. So I think they started in 1998 or 1999. The school was very focused on making sure they wanted to welcome students from everywhere, that it wasn't just a kind of gaming, school, and to encourage people to go there. But what I think happened to me, and as well as the UNLV Law School, the Boyd School of Law, is that they embrace the fact that we have this great resource of knowledge, understanding integrated resorts, how they're open. We have more gaming licensees in over, I think 1,200 in Nevada than any other state. So why not embrace something that we know very well and has done great things for our state? And so, as you know, now there's a Master of Laws, an LLM in gaming that the law school offers. And I think, now that I've been able to join an international firm as well, I realize at Covington and Burling that, there are certain things that we maybe take for granted in Nevada that we're just so used to, that we've seen, such as, regulated gaming or sports wagering. Those are things that we've all been accustomed to in Nevada for quite some time, that states in the other states in the US are just now starting to legalize and regulate.
Yeah, certainly, because obviously since PASPA was overturned, sports betting is all people in kind of US gaming essentially talk about. But of course, in Nevada, it's nothing new really. It was always kind of regulated sports betting around there. Obviously, you mentioned MGM Resorts, a huge firm that you used to work with. How do you kind of reflect on your time there? Kind of what were your key kind of learnings? I would say any interesting stories, but I don't know, from a legal perspective, I'm not sure if you're allowed to disclose the most interesting stories, really.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to disclose kind of details about cases because of privilege, but I will say that I was to have the amount of resources, especially when you're litigating a matter such as camera footage. And I think most people should know that when you're at a gaming property, you should assume that you're on camera, but I think some people maybe forget about that. And so that was always great to have access to very helpful, hopefully most of the times helpful evidence to kind of discount some of the allegations. People come, unfortunately, to Vegas sometimes. It's a good thing. We want them to let their hair down and have fun in a safe way, but sometimes their memories aren't exactly what the footage showed. So I'll kind of put it that way. So it was great, I think, as a young lawyer to have great resources, wonderful trained personnel that understand procedure, that can kind of give us what we needed to be able to defend the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, I mean, you spoke kind of quite glowingly of your work with the regulator in Nevada. How do you kind of reflect on your time there? And you mentioned as well, there's the NGC and there's the NGCB. I mean, again, I'm not sure if other states might find that confusing. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and Nevada is different because we created, the state created this two-tiered system to ensure, and there's strict statutes on that, prohibit association or participation with political parties, and obviously gifts, donations, no other source of income for gaming control board members, to ensure that the regulator is completely focused on gaming and that there's not going to be any outside influence. And I can tell you that the board members and the chairs that I've interacted with in the past, and even to this day, take that very seriously. They understand that any type of threat to the integrity of the board is obviously a threat on the industry, which provides significant amount of resources and employment in the state. And I'm confident that other regulators in other states feel the same way. But my time there, I think that I miss them. It's a great team. And I don't think people really understand how much that team there does. Some of the people have been there for 20 years. And then you have some people obviously that are new, that are bringing in new insights with respect to technology, and, being able to use, apps. And obviously with COVID, the kind of virtual working environment, they've been able to pivot and still do, the business of the board, whether it be enforcement investigations and technology approvals as needed. And I think just as you've seen with payment modernization kind of being expedited, or at least a greater understanding that we need to be able to allow other forms of payment has been somewhat expedited because of COVID. I think the board has also embraced, and many other regulators too have also embraced kind of using technology to their benefit, whether it be streaming meetings and providing electronic documents for review.
Just on that point there, I remember when I first joined Gambling Insider, a few years back, there was often talk from companies that regulators don't quite keep up with, not specifically in the US or in Nevada or anything, but regulators don't quite keep up with technological change of pace as much. I mean, given the point you've made there, do you think it's maybe the Nevada regulator and others in the US have actually shown quite a good aptitude recently, especially with COVID, and as you say, kind of expedition of kind of cashless technology and that kind of thing?
I think everyone should be commended. All the regulators should be commended for the work that they're doing, because these investigations take time. And when you're doing an investigation, a lot of them require, interviews. If you can't travel, that's a difficult thing to do. In the broader context, even beyond regulators, there could be a lot of discussion. And I think the criticism you mentioned is definitely a fair point. But these are usually regulators that are receiving funding from the government, right? And so obviously, governments are looking for new revenue sources. That's why you've seen kind of an increase, I think, in the legalization of sports wagering. So it goes both ways. Yes, I think the operators and suppliers and manufacturers, their job is to have, the most up-to-date technology because they know that that's what the customer is expecting. We would love, I think everyone would like regulators to have more resources to be able to expedite those approvals.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, due to the limited resources that they have, sometimes it falls a little bit behind.
Mhm. Back to sort of kind of your career and your path. More recently, obviously, you joined Caesars, and just wanted to kind of ask you. I mean, how's that going, first of all, but also, what exactly does your role cover there? What do you do with the company?
Well, I'm on the board of directors for Caesars, so I'm not an employee.
Mm-hmm.
And so I serve with a very talented group that basically assists with, strategic initiatives and the vision for the company, and making sure that the executive management team, which is incredibly talented and has been able to kind of allow Caesars to continue to grow and redefine itself, to making sure that the vision that the board has is aligned with what management has been executing.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you mentioned the management team because obviously the Caesars brand is so strong. But it's interesting to think that a couple of years ago, the management team was effectively Eldorado Resorts and Caesars, and now you've kind of had this, I guess, this mega combination of the two, and it was a historic kind of merger at the time. May still be kind of the highest fee. How do you describe working with that kind of management team at the moment?
They're incredible. Gary Carano is our executive chairman, and he's obviously his family was, founded kind of the Eldorado brand. And right now our CEO is Tom Reeg, an exceptional, brilliant CEO with, I think, a vision to when he came in and the decision was made to acquire Caesars, how that would be done and how it would be executed. And I think the team's done a great job. Anthony Carano is the president and COO. You have Brent Yunker, CFO, and they have really took over at a very difficult time because that merger was, I think, ultimately approved maybe in the spring or summer of 2020. But I think that this launch of Caesar Sportsbook in so many states has been great. And I'm sure you've heard that gaming revenue for the land-based properties have been well and met or exceeded expectations as well.
Mm-hmm. I think that the timing of this interview works well because in New York, numbers just came out that Caesars is right at the top in terms of market share for mobile sportsbook. So, I mean, that certainly kind of backs up your point. When it comes to your role with Caesars, I mean, you're also if I'm not mistaken, on a couple of other board of directors at the moment. How do you kind of balance all of that? And I mean, it sounds like you juggle quite a lot, really.
Well, it's time management, and I think that's I will continue to work on that. But the boards that I'm a member of, obviously Caesars, with I shouldn't say the Eldorado family, the Caesars family. I think that they understood me and what I could bring to the table as a Nevadan, obviously with my compliance and kind of risk management background. And I believe that, they saw that value in me, and I saw the vision that they had for the company, which is why I decided to join them. I'm also on the board of Allegiant Travel Company that is also based in Las Vegas. A wonderful, great kind of growing airline that's mostly kind of based in the South. Obviously, a lot of airports and routes in Florida as well, and also going to the Midwest. Just a great management team and a great company that's kind of continuing to grow its brand. So, balancing those positions, there's obviously meetings, and I'll balance that. But I definitely was excited to join the law firm of Covington and Burling as well. I definitely thought I could bring some expertise there in their gaming practice group, and that firm is obviously well known, is headquartered in DC, but just has such a wide breadth of talented lawyers and a really true depth of all regulatory experience, not just gaming, but a lot of former regulators that are there. And so I think that it was a good fit for me because they understood what background I bring and how we can continue to assist and provide advice to policymakers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, I mean, you've kind of got a lot of areas covered, branched out of gaming certainly as well. If we're to focus specifically on gaming, obviously MGM Resorts, then kind of the Nevada regulators, and now Caesars. What was the transition like from operator to regulator, and more recently, having been on the regulator side and sort of, I guess, being back on the operator side?
Sure. Well, I had there was a significant gap in time from when I left MGM to before I joined the Gaming Commission. But at the time that I joined the commission, the composition was much different. And I was actually one of the few lawyers on the commission. Now I think there are significantly more.
Mm-hmm.
But and before then, I was actually on the Nevada Athletic Commission that governed and that regulated boxing and mixed martial arts. So I did have somewhat of a regulatory background before joining the commission. But just working and meeting with industry, understanding what their issues or concerns are, obviously meeting with people that have been at the board and the chiefs and the managers and the supervisors that have been at the board for a while, understanding what their challenges were, and making sure, as the public policy mandates, that there was going to be continued stability of the industry. And I think, stability of the industry includes looking at other ways that the industry can, safely provide additional kind of gaming experiences, obviously in a safe manner, being in tune with responsible gaming measures, and being able to do things more remotely or digitally as well. But it definitely was a transition. And I think the transition was probably harder for me going from a regulator going back to the private sector, because it's obviously very rule based, and sometimes I'm now focused on, okay, what does my client need, obviously, to get the best result that they can, obviously within the parameters of the regulation. So I'm still working on that adjustment, but things are going well.
Mm-hmm. And I think you've mentioned that there's a cooling off period from leaving the commission and joining Caesars.
Yes, of course. In Nevada, we have a cooling off period. It's actually in statute, and any concerns about that, actually, there's a separate Nevada Ethics Commission that kind of addresses those type of issues. But there is a 1-year cooling off period, and so for that time, anyone that would I shouldn't say anyone. I think it's a public officer, and there's a definition for that in Nevada law, that you cannot kind of go directly to the industry or to the industry that you would have regulated or would have provided some type of advice for before. So there was a 1-year cooling off period. Obviously, I and many others, whether the public officials or regulators, are not able to kind of go directly to the private sector.
So, it's an interesting rule, but I think it's a good rule. I think it's is that common practice kind of for states, or is that something Nevada just does quite well?
Oh no, I think it's pretty standard for most states in the U.S. I don't know. I just do know that I've spoken to some other regulators in other states, and they're working on some other matters before they could go into the gaming industry. Or honestly, when I was city attorney, for example, I couldn't necessarily go directly to work for a company that maybe received an approval from the city. So it just depends on the circumstance.
Yeah, sure. Definitely makes sense. Thanks very much for kind of all your analysis and answers so far. So it's been a really interesting conversation. I've got a final sort of overall topic, and it's quite broad, really. As someone who works in gaming and has worked in regulation and law at the moment, kind of what's your overall take on the main kind of regulatory issues of today in the US? Because obviously sports betting is really accelerating. There's always plenty of regulatory talking points. But what are kind of the main ones for someone who's in the industry at the moment, such as yourself, and how do you kind of feel it's all where is it all going at the moment?
Well, I think it's going very quickly, and I think that obviously there's a lot of laws and regulations that are being passed, and you see kind of comments made that state X is going to make sure this is done before the Super Bowl and things like that. But as those happen and as those partnerships and sponsorships happen, they're happening quickly. And I think that it's important to really have good, sound regulatory counsel or legal advice when they're entering in, when any regulated entity or even any business is partnering with a regulated entity to make sure that the rules are being followed. Because as you know, and as we've discussed, every state does have different regulations, right? And and gaming licenses are all privileged licenses. And so when you're entering a market, it's really important to make sure that you understand the nuances of each state, which is why I think regulatory counsel is also important. I also think you're going to see consistent themes and discussions about responsible gaming. As with the convenience of being able to use your phone or other non-cash ways of payment, also come potential regulations or at least some type of policies that will allow people to kind of limit the amount that they wager, or notices and things like that. And so I think a lot of the responsible operators, suppliers, and manufacturers will also be focusing on responsible wagering as well. I know that's a big focus of the American Gaming Association too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as someone who sort of sits here on this side of the Atlantic Ocean, the UK market quite mature in terms of online and sports betting, and there's a lot of regulatory issues that we're kind of experiencing at the moment. A lot of focus on responsible gambling. It's interesting to see kind of when and how that kind of hits the US market, and maybe the operators can do a better job of kind of leading that rather than maybe waiting till till regulators step in. But it's all remains to be seen, and but as you say, it's definitely going to be a big focus. I think that's undeniable at this point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. With the US being such a nascent industry with respect to online,
Yeah.
I'm certainly things that can be learned from the UK as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sandra, thanks very much for your analysis and talking us through your career. And it's been a pleasure having you on the GI Huddle.
Great. Thanks for having me, Tim.